Ex-editor of the News of the World as his spin doctor. While people like Paul Dacre of the Daily Mail and Kelvin Mackenzie, lately of The Sun, think the noble lord should have stuck to failing to get a prosecution against Ken Dodd for tax evasion. They were bothered by three big questions. Firstly, do we need a new regulator for the press? Paul Dacre, editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail, didn't think so.
I'd like to try to persuade this inquiry that self-regulation, albeit in a considerably beefed up form, is, in a country that regards itself as truly democratic, the only viable way of policing a genuinely free press.
Secondly, how can one guarantee that free press? Dacre thinks commercial success is the only guarantor of freedom.
I would argue that Britain's commercially viable free press, because it's in hock to nobody, is the only real free media in this country. Over-regulate that press, and you put democracy itself in peril.
And finally, the question of whether the Leveson inquiry was necessary at all. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, knocked that on the head.
Why do we need an inquiry of this kind? There are plenty of laws to cover what went on. After all, 16 people have already been arrested, and my bet is that the numbers may well go up to as many as 30 once the police officers start being rounded up on the corruption allegations.
Well, now, two people who are quite familiar with coverage in the Daily Mail are here. The last time Steve Coogan was on the show, the Daily Mail wrote a most disobliging piece about him a few days later. There we are, Steve Coogan, the phone hacking scandal, and a sickening case of hypocrisy. And Louise Mensch, MP, has also featured in that paper on topics such as whether she's had plastic surgery and her marriage. Now, first of all, let's take the first question, self-regulation. Does self-regulation, as was argued by Paul Dacre today, work?
Well, manifestly it doesn't work in the form in which we currently have, and I think it was absolutely ludicrous of Mr Dacre to suggest at some length that there was no problem there whatsoever. We've got to have it massively beefed up and changed, and it is entirely facile to come in and say that it's all working great. I think that there should be government oversight of it, but broadly self-regulation of the press, because you must have a free press.
Well, I think the Press Complaints Commission that you tried to defend palpably failed in the biggest single test of its existence in the last 20 years with the hacking scandal. It did nothing. The only reason that has come to the fore is because of tenacity from certain celebrities and the Guardian newspaper, who decided to pursue this.
And fellow journalists, therefore, operating under a system of self-regulation.
Yes, but and those journalists are to be applauded. I don't have a problem with those journalists. It's the ones that do the muckraking I have a problem with.
OK, so do you then favour the second question which came up, which was, what is the guarantee of a free press? Now, Paul Dacre argued, quite plausibly, did he not, that the best guarantee of a free press is a commercially viable press?
Well, a commercially viable press, a free press, a press led by the market, has led to the hacking of Millie Dowler's phone and the hacking of victims of crime phones. So that's what leaving it to the market does. That's what we get with that.
You also get the Mail being free to name the alleged murderers of Stephen Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean that's the one example people use because it's sort of
wasn't it a brave, good thing to do?
It's notable by its singularity and the fact that it's the one case that breaks the rule. That all the Daily Mail are interested in, and all they do are it's commercial interest. It's selling newspapers, and everything is based on who's shagging who. It's not about trying to expose corruption.
Well, it's not all about that. That, as he explained today, was a way of selling newspapers. It helped to sell newspapers, which carried the cost of the other stuff.
Yes, but the point is that's not why this whole thing has occurred. It's occurred because the victims of crime, their phones have been hacked, and self-regulation hasn't worked in that. It's only come about because of this aberration.
It's a breach of the law.
Yeah, because people broke the law. Yes, but it was only uncovered because people... It was nothing to do with the Press Complaints Commission that exposed that.
I mean, you've been a victim of... I won't ask you about whether you've had plastic surgery or Botox or whatever you're supposed to have had, but in these... This must be hurtful.
Well, it can be a little bit hurtful, but I think we're drawing maybe a false distinction between the pure tabloid press and the quality press. It was The Guardian that asked me the entirely unfeminist question in an interview ostensibly about my politics as to whether or not I'd had a facelift, and then put that as the strapline on the cover.
Well, I don't know why you're surprised.
This was picked up because it's fluff in a way that sells stories. Now, if we want the Guardian's phone hacking journalism, if we want the Telegraph's expensive stories, as much as that was unpleasant for me, I think you've got to give them license to run the sort of human interest stories.
You guys, you would just have to roll with the punches.
I think you have to roll with the punches a little bit. It depends on degree.
Why can't you roll with the punches?
It depends on degree.
I think that polarising this into it's either freedom of the press and intrusion into people's lives or not is the broadsheets colluding with the tabloid press in a way that makes them unwitting stooges of people like Paul Dacre and News International.
Well, I think the Guardian needs to be ashamed, really, having seen your intro there, because the Daily Mail's facelift piece, which they run as the big thing on conference, that's what everyone's talking about, not politics, but as this girl had a facelift. That comes directly from the Guardian, and they need to be ashamed of it. Now, I can talk about Corby being the fastest growing town in the country, but that doesn't make the interview. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested in selling the papers on fluff, and I think it's a price we have to pay, because the circulation in almost all the papers plummets.
So what if circulation's going down? If newspapers exist to basically make money, and this byproduct is they occasionally do things that are noble and laudable, then but they make the most of their profit comes from searching through people's rubbish bins, then they deserve to go to the wall.
Why does it hurt you?
It doesn't. It's not about hurt. I'm not here for me. I'm here because of other people, not famous people, people who are defenceless, who can't afford to go to the courts to defend themselves, whose lives, in the case of that tabloid journalist a few years ago, he said, we ruin lives, we ruin people's lives. That's what we do. That was a rare moment of candour from one of the tabloid newspapers.
But as far as you're concerned, they can say what they like about you. You're acting on behalf of others, you say?
Well, I think there's certain rules. It has to be in the public interest. And basically, if I was someone, I don't think we should roll with the punches. I think there are certain questions that are legitimate, some aren't. If I went round as a politician saying I was the paragon of virtue and extolling the family values and all the rest of it, and then my personal life would be legitimate because I'm trading on that to be elected. I write comedy. If they think my comedy's crap, they're welcome to say so. But my personal life's nothing to do with them. Would Paul Dacre like it if I went through his bin or I asked him what exactly he gets up to in bed? It's none of my business. It's none of his.
I would certainly agree that Paul Dacre's being disingenuous. In the Operation Motorman files, which the Independent got hold of, Associated Newspaper Group had 1,300 separate transactions. Blagging's only legal in the public interest. He said today, for example, people should be free to get ex-directory phone numbers, and yet it was shown by the Independent looking at the Motorman files that part of the blagging example was going after the parents of the Dunblane children and finding their ex-directory phone numbers through blagging. How can that be justified? It cannot. But we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we make newspapers report only on good and worthy things, the sad fact of the matter is people will not buy those newspapers. They just will not.
Well, people do buy the newspaper. People buy the Guardian. People buy the broadsheets.
And that's why maybe why is the Guardian writing about my facelift?
If they don't buy those, if the tabloids can only exist by reporting that kind of garbage, then that's not a good enough reason for them to exist.
So you would rather a free press disappeared? Are you serious?
No, of course, no. There's plenty of free newspapers who don't have to indulge in that kind of thing that report the news.
Well, not sure that the Times is down 14% year-on-year circulation. The Observer's down 11% year-on-year circulation.
So you're saying that what we have to do is let them basically intrude into people's personal lives. They're going to have to become more inventive and more creative. Or be more entertaining. I managed to entertain people without searching through people's rubbish bins.
That's true.
I don't have to do that.
Well, no, they're going to have to stop the hacking and blagging because people aren't going to put up with it anymore. Now the general public has realised how they get some of these stories. They're going to have to be more inventive. But your Daily Mail fluffy kitten stories are not going to go away, and that is the price that public figures are going to have to put up with. If we want a free press, they're occasionally to expose corruption. If we want the Telegraph MP's expensive stories, that's the price.
We also have to remember I caricature what Paul Dacre is and the Daily Mail. This is a newspaper we chose as the newspaper to be Alan Partridge's favourite newspaper because it has the requisite level of pompous prurience and contempt for the weak and a xenophobic attitude, and this creates this image of a little England where people play cricket, drink warm beer, and all the corner shops are run by white people. And that is not reality. And I don't think that someone who presents and trades to people's worst fears, as that newspaper does, it panders to people's worst fears. I don't believe it deserves to exist. If the Daily Mail went to the wall tomorrow, I'd be delighted. There's lots of other better newspapers. It's worse than the tabloids.
I know on my very well you have great sympathy with you on the Daily Mail, but if not the Daily Mail, then who?
Well, do you know what?
We need somebody out there to sell the
Well, the Red Tops at least wear the
papers.
vulgarity on their sleeve. The Daily Mail has a certain duplicity to its nature.
Yes, you rather amusingly said it was halfway between a broadsheet and a tabloid, which certainly amused me no end.
Well, I'll be interested to see what they write about you tomorrow.
I hope they don't. If they do, that, I'll be pleased.
Thank you both very much, thanks. Now, the MP for North Somerset is still our Defence Secretary tonight. Liam Fox has had to cancel